my work or with me, but you want to make me redundant. No reply. Except this delivered in a supportive, soft-spoken voice, dripping with a sad-eyed concern that can only come from having done the training course. Look, we know this may be difficult for you to take in at the moment, so you don't need to work the rest of the day, but come in tomorrow and we can have another meeting. I stumbled out of the room. If the walk away from my desk was hard, the walk back to it was harder. To walk back through an open plan office where you've just discovered that the open plan is that you don't work there anymore, is to move through an environment, an ecosystem, a home, like a ghost. Nothing has changed, but everything has changed. All because someone has told you that you don't belong anymore. It's a very hard walk back to your desk. Well, I say to Judy before I sit down, it's been nice working with you. A look of disbelief spreads across her face, and I was, and always will be. And I was, and always will be, grateful for that look. I go home. Now, that's not a conversation I'd wish on anyone. Or maybe that's not strictly true anymore. The next Thursday, I go back for a second meeting. The next day, Thursday, I go back for a second meeting. By the time I walked into the second meeting, I'd had a lot of time to think. Well, you know, when you wake up at 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep, there's not a lot else to do. And the main thing I thought was this: I don't understand. So it was this train of thought I pursued in the second meeting. I made the points I made before, I made additional points, and I made the points more coherently because I wasn't in shock anymore. And the more I made my reasonable, well thought through points, the more I argued my case, the more I tried to get, insert name here, and the senior woman from HR to engage with me, the more I realised that they weren't listening. The decision had been made. The corporate machine was rolling, and the only thing it was interested in now was getting me out of the door and out of the way with as little fuss as was possible. And this corporate machine was huge, a multi-million-pound entity, spanning continents, employing hundreds, positioning itself as a cutting-edge communication business that understood how to talk to people through the myriad of new channels that the digital explosion had created. And that was funny, really funny, a whole business based on communication. But when I wanted to engage in that most basic, most fundamental form of communication, a conversation, it had all gone decidedly, computer says no. It didn't matter what I said, it didn't matter how I said it. The business decision had been made to lose one writer. An objective assessment process had been fired up that assigned everyone a single numerical score. My score had come out lowest, so I was history. If I left the first meeting in shock, then when I left the second meeting, something else was starting to stir inside me, and that something else was anger. Now, ask anyone who knows me and you'll discover that I'm not an individual much given to anger, but the capacity for anger exists in us all. So back me into a corner, reduce me to a number, and threaten to take away my livelihood by which I support my family, and do it all for reasons that make no sense whatsoever, and anger is a response that you are going to encounter. But when it comes to anger, I'm with John Lydon in his days with Public Image. As the blessed Johnny so succinctly put it, anger is an energy. That's one of those lines from a song that has stuck with me over the years. We've probably all got them, and they stay with us for a myriad of reasons. Maybe it's the melody that underlies them. Maybe it's the cleverness of the words. Maybe we hear them at a moment in our lives when they strike so particular a chord that they become somehow fused to that moment. Like when you're a teenager and your heart is being broken and there is a particular breakup song being played everywhere. So forever the song and the moment become one. So as a slight aside, here's a list from the top of my head. What they say about me, I don't really know. Too much cheesecake too soon. Roxy Music. It's a joke, but it's not that funny. The Beat. September 77, Port Elizabeth weather fine, Peter Gabriel. Once I had a love and it was a gas. Soon turns out I had a heart of glass. Blondie. And in this dirty town, there's nothing going for me. Graham Parker and the Rumour. On reflection, looking at this list, there is one thought that comes to me, one blindingly obvious insight, and it's this: I am not a kid anymore. Most of these songs wind back over 30 years. but I'm still the same person I was.
40.
But I'm still the same person I was when these lines first bedded down in my brain, except now I'm older and wiser and stupider, and I'm not afraid anymore. I've been made redundant twice before. Both times were way back near the start of my career. And both times, looking back, I felt many of the same things I did this time. But both times back then, I also felt, and I'm somewhat uncomfortable admitting this, I also felt afraid. I felt small, alone, rejected, and afraid. Oh yes, I covered it all up with that lie that we all utter when our oh-so-recent colleagues ask us how we are. You know, the lie, the I'm okay lie, the lie we try to convincingly deliver to cover the hurt and the illogical, inexplicable feeling of shame that's part of being made redundant. I'm okay, that lie, because it is a lie, because we're not okay. We're a long way from okay. So while this time around I felt small, alone and rejected, I didn't feel afraid, which is just as well, because if I was going to do what I had decided to do, fear would be of no use to me, because what I had decided to do was fight back. It's December 1956. Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and 80 other ill-assorted would-be revolutionaries set on overthrowing the dictator Batista land on the coast of Cuba. Exhausted from their voyage, they start to march inland, but 2 days later they're ambushed by the Cuban army. Of the 82 rebels that landed, only 12 escape. And in scattered groups they head for the sanctuary of the Sierra Maestra Mountains. Between them, they had only 9 weapons. The Cuban army and Cuban police force had a combined manpower of around 37,000. But just over 2 years later, a defeated Batista had fled Cuba, and Fidel and Che walked into Havana to be greeted by cheering crowds, which is, you must admit, quite a turnaround. For various reasons, I once read a lot of books about Che Guevara, so the story, the legend of the Cuban Revolution is always lurking somewhere at the back of my mind. And part of the legend is the audacious way that Fidel's outnumbered and outgunned force launched their campaign. They attacked a barracks. They didn't wait to be hunted down, they didn't wait to be picked off, to be rolled over. They attacked a barracks. And I thought, inappropriate and grandiose though the analogy is, well, here I am, outnumbered, outgunned, and half out the door. Why don't I attack the barracks? And that's exactly what I did. Anger is an energy. You just have to focus it, you just have to fuel it. And I had plenty of logs to chuck on the fire. I thought about how I had been made to feel. I thought about how unfair it all was. I thought about the soft-spoken, big-eyed way it had all been done, like being knifed by a kitten. A kitten with a spreadsheet. I thought about the walk to the room. I thought about the walk back to my desk. I thought about being judged and found wanting by people whose own performances were consistently unimpressive in their overpaid, overprotected positions of power. I thought about having to go home and break the news. I thought about that first Monday morning that was coming when I'd have nowhere to go. I thought about the way the people who had supposedly made the decision had in fact done nothing of the sort, but had instead abdicated the responsibility to a system because that made it easier for them. I thought about the fact that all that I was reduced to a single number. I even thought about the fact that the number I had been reduced to wasn't even a wholly serious number. It was 69, a number with a smirk built into it. I thought about the term HR, human resources, and how much it annoyed me. I mean, companies used to have personnel departments, and personnel, reassuringly, had the word person in it. But at some point in the dim and distant past, the corporate world decided that human resources was a much better way to talk about the people who worked for a company as if we were, essentially, in the eyes of the company, a resource. And once you start thinking about the people you work with as a resource, what kind of person are you? What kind of cog in what kind of machine have you become? I thought about the Finch, 6 Degrees Simon and Croissantita, and how if this played out the way it would play out, how our lives were spinning off on orbits that would no longer align, how we'd become comets intersecting in time and space only rarely. I thought about the phrase, my job, and no matter what we think of that job, no matter how unhappy we may be with it, how important it is in defining who we are, both to others and to ourselves. I thought about all the friends I've known over the years who've been made redundant and how isolated and alone they must have felt. And I thought about how the company, for all its expressed concern, was only really interested in getting me out of the door with as little fuss as possible. And I thought, fuck you, time to tool up. Now, this whole saga had happened over the course of a couple of days. My first meeting had been on a Wednesday morning, the second meeting on Thursday morning. A week that had started out as just another week had turned my world upside down in the course of 24 hours. And that's another aspect of the whole situation that you only understand once you're in it. There's a momentum to it, an irresistible equation of emotional mass and emotional velocity. And in many ways, that's what the company uses to get you through the door, out of the building, off the books, and before you know it, you find yourself alone on the pavement, bemusedly blinking in the sunlight, 24 hours, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. To help me to come to terms with what was happening, I was told that I was now in a 2-week consultation process. And I was told that during this 2-week consultation process, I didn't need to come in. So Friday was the first day I didn't go into the office at all. That morning, that Friday morning at 9:30, the time that I would normally get into the office, the world was plunged into darkness. Now I realise that this might sound like a melodramatic overreaction, except it was true. There was an eclipse. And I thought to myself, well, even the gods aren't happy with what's going on. Best crack on with my plan. And the plan went like this. There have been 2 meetings so far, 2 meetings in which the company had held the upper hand, 2 meetings in which they'd been in total control, but meeting 3 was coming up. And meeting 3 was going to be different. When insert name here had told me I was going to be made redundant, he'd read out a letter to me, a letter that had left me in a state of shock. Now I'm a very good writer, and I know how to write a letter, and why should I be the only one to have the fun of experiencing a state of shock? So I wrote a letter of my own. The letter that had been read out to me was half a page long. The letter I wrote was 8 times that length. 4 pages of A4 closely typed. You could say quite a lot in 4 pages of A4 closely typed. I wrote the letter, I rewrote the letter, I made it angry but well argued. My logic was that you can dismiss abuse, but you can't dismiss reason. And I wasn't going to give them the chance to dismiss me again. And over the weekend, I rehearsed reading the letter. Turns out, when you add in the necessary pauses you need for dramatic emphasis, it takes 11 minutes to read out 4 pages of A4 closely typed. And 11 minutes is quite a long time for someone to have to sit still while you eloquently dismantle them. That would be really quite uncomfortable. So I added another page. 5 pages, 13 minutes, game on. I also planned how to set up the meeting. You see, I believe that if you wait for a meeting to start the meeting, then you're missing a trick. You have to set things up so the people you're having the meeting with walk into the room in the right frame of mind, the frame of mind that gives you the best chance of achieving whatever it is that you have set out to do. So on the Friday, I sent in a couple of emails to the senior woman from HR. In the first one, I asked how much I would be paid off with when I left. In the second one, I came over all poor me and said, I was struggling to understand what had happened, and just for my own peace of mind, could you confirm that it was only under the objective scoring system that I had come up short, and that no one had been unhappy with my work or with how I got on with my colleagues? I got a reply that stated the figure I'd be paid, and I got a confirmation in writing that no one at the company was unhappy with me or with my work. Thank you very much. I'd asked about the money for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to know what was on the table. And also, by asking about the money, it would appear that I was starting to negotiate. And once you start to negotiate, that normally signals that you have pulled away from any defiant stance that you may have initially taken. Start talking about money, and the argument has shifted from principle to price. Companies love it when you do that. because it means that they have won. It means that you've accepted what's happened, and yes, you may well hold out for a little more money.